Christine Lagarde and her little bag have been much talked about in the last week as the IMF collects funds for a €1 trillion firewall. But what are the real funds being committed to prevent the expansion of the Eurozone debt crisis? Dr. Frank Hollenbeck joins us. Dr. Frank, good morning. The 20 IMF countries have pledged $430 billion in credit lines towards the IMF's available bailout fund, the Eurozone firewall, as it's now become known. This process hasn't been without controversy, though, as Canada and the US both refused to add funds. Why do you think this is?
Well, for example, Japan decided to contribute $60 billion to this fund, but Japan is already sitting on a debt to GDP ratio of 200%. So with the current levels of debt we're seeing in the United States and elsewhere, you kind of wonder why they're contributing funds to the IMF, which is supposed to be dealing with developed countries, less developed countries, instead of developed countries like in the EU.
But the IMF is not the only organisation dedicated to dealing with this crisis. We also have the EFSF and the ESM, both of which have undergone modifications in the last year in order to meet the levels of this debt crisis. But can you tell us a little bit more about the structure of these organisations and how they work?
Well, this structure means that we've put a firewall of about €1 trillion. For me, it's an illusion of a firewall because we don't really have €1 trillion out there that we can draw on. When we talk about €1 trillion, we're talking about guarantees. And let me give you a little example. Suppose that you're Jenny. Okay. And Jenny has a lot of debt to banks, but Jenny is a good worker and she has a good job. Now, suppose that she has a half brother, and let's call this half brother's Francis Pigs. And Francis Pigs has borrowed a lot of money from banks, basically to subsidize his drug habit. And he wants to take out another loan from the banks, but he needs you to guarantee 35% of it. Okay. And you basically say, well, Francis, do you intend to end your drug habit? And Francis says, well, this year I'm going to have a hard problem doing it, but don't worry, next year I absolutely guarantee you that I will stop my drug habit. And then you say, well, okay, even if you stop your drug habit, I mean, you've taken on a lot of debt, okay? How do you intend to pay for it? Well, Francis says, well, I intend to live to be 110. And if I live to be 110, then I should be able to pay it off by that date, okay? And we have a similar situation in Europe. I guess I should have asked you, you're Jenny, would you give Francis the loan, or would you guarantee the loan to the bank?
No.
Okay. Well, Germany is a very similar situation as Jenny is at the moment, in the sense that of these guarantees, 50% comes from France, Spain, and Italy. Okay. And when we talk about €1 trillion, the guarantees that really matter, and the guarantees are the ones from Germany, they're only about €360 billion. So for me, that's really what we should be considering to be the foundation of this €1 trillion guarantee, is essentially the $360 billion that's going to come from Germany. But then again, Germany is not in the best situation, in the sense that you don't take a sickly looking apple, combine it with a whole bunch of rotten apples, and get a whole bunch of, a basket of shiny new apples, in the sense that even at $360 billion, the fact Germany would have a hard time obtaining those loans, given the fact that it already has an 85% debt to GDP ratio and has an enormous amount of unfunded liabilities into the future.
You say that about countries taking on debt on top of debt. For example, Germany and the loan that they've provided, no one's in a good position to be able to be giving this additional money. For example, if you had your average person on the street and they've said, okay, I've taken out an overdraft on my credit card, but then I'm going to take a loan to pay off that credit card. It's just lunacy. At some point, surely countries have to stop giving that money in order to try and preserve their own economies.
Yes, this setup is almost guaranteeing that we're going to have a slow motion train wreck, and that when the ship sinks, it's going to take everyone with them. And what we're doing is we're pushing the problem into the future instead of dealing with it today. And the austerity measures that we've implemented are the wrong type of austerity measures. But I guess my talking about austerity is for another interview.
Dr. Frank, thank you very much. Dr. Frank Hollenbeck there, who'll be joining us next week to discuss austerity. Do stay tuned to Dukascopy TV for all the latest exclusive interviews. For now, though, goodbye.